Whenever we see a clash, whether it's, say, a tense argument at work, a massive corporate takeover, or even a full-scale war, we kind of just naturally assume both sides are playing by the exact same rules, right? But actually, it turns out the hidden mechanics of human conflict are completely asymmetrical. So let's unpack this in today's explainer.
Think about it for a second. When a conflict breaks out, who usually wins? Is it the attacker, the one actively pushing for change and showing all that aggression? Or is it the defender, the one just trying to keep things exactly as they are? Now, your gut might tell you the attacker absolutely has the edge here. I mean, after all, they've got the element of surprise and the drive to conquer, right? Well,
the data actually shows something totally different. Historically speaking, revisionist states and attackers only win about 25% of the time. Yeah, just a quarter. And hostile corporate takeovers, they have similarly dismal success rates. So it really makes you wonder, why do attackers fail so often? Well, uncovering the answer to that reveals some absolutely fascinating things about human nature.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll be rethinking the shape of conflict. Second, we'll dive into the attacker-defender game. Third, we'll explore the psychology of fighting. And finally, we'll look at what happens when massive groups go to war.
Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, Rethinking the Shape of Conflict.
To really understand why we fight, we basically have to throw out our whole symmetrical view of conflict. Evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins and John Krebs once hit the nail on the head with this observation. They said, the rabbit runs faster than the fox because the rabbit is running for his life, while the fox is only running for his dinner. It's a perfect metaphor. The defender is fighting tooth and nail to avoid a devastating loss, while the attacker, they're merely seeking a gain. Those are two fundamentally different motivations.
And honestly, translating that rabbit and fox dynamic into game theory changes the whole picture. In traditional models, like the classic prisoner's dilemma, both sides face the exact same risks and rewards. But in the real world, it's an attacker-defender game. The attacker is gambling. They're trying to maximize their personal gain, almost like a game of chicken. But the defender, they act purely to protect against loss, making it an assurance game. Just switching those roles completely changes the entire reason for fighting.
which brings us to Section 2, the attacker-defender game.
Now, we all know that humans are deeply loss-averse. I mean, losing 20 bucks hurts way more than finding 20 bucks feels good. This natural instinct makes the defender, the one protecting against being exploited, way more desperate and totally committed. The attacker, on the other hand, is just gambling for a gain. They completely lack that existential urgency.
What this creates is this really fascinating high-stakes game of hide-and-seek. The attacker is always trying to mismatch the defender's strategy, right? They want to strike when the guard is down, often by totally faking weakness. But the defender has to play the opposite game. They want to match the threat. They have to accurately predict exactly how hostile the attacker is going to be so they can meet it with equal force.
And real-world behavioral data proves just how difficult the attacker's job really is. Studies show that attackers actually invest less in the conflict and hesitate way more often than defenders do. They take significantly more time to make their decisions. And it makes perfect sense. They are constantly trying to outsmart their opponent, while the defender is just purely, rapidly reacting to whatever is thrown at them.
Let's look a little deeper in Section 3, the psychology of fighting. Because underneath all these tactics, our brains are literally rewiring themselves in the heat of the moment. Since attackers are taking this massive gamble, they rely on a very specific psychological tool, overconfidence. They consistently overestimate their relative strength and chances of success. Now that sounds like a fatal flaw, doesn't it? But actually, it's a functional bias. It gives them the necessary hope to even initiate a fight in the first place.
Now, defenders, they absolutely cannot afford that kind of overconfidence. Underestimating a threat means losing everything. So their functional bias is what we call hostile attribution bias, which basically means overestimating malicious intent in others. For them, it's a pure survival mechanism. It is infinitely better to be constantly suspicious and prepared than to be caught off guard.
And these totally different behavioral biases, they are fueled by completely different brain chemistries. The attacker's brain is flooded with dopamine and testosterone. It's a highly calculating, reward-seeking state that requires a ton of executive control. The defender's brain, meanwhile, is just swimming in cortisol. It's stressed, it's hypervigilant, and it's focused on one thing and one thing only: survival.
So, what happens when we scale this up? That brings us to Section 4, when groups go to war.
When you take these individual instincts and apply them to massive groups, like armies, a totally new challenge emerges. Defender groups are organically united by a shared fate. Think about it. If the defense fails, literally everyone loses their homes or their lives. But attacker groups, they are plagued by what's called the free rider problem. If the group conquers new territory, everyone shares the reward, even the guys who hid in the back during the battle. The temptation to just sit back and let others take the risk is absolutely enormous.
And we see this struggle play out in real time. If you look at the data on group coordination, attacker groups show this wild, chaotic variance across rounds of conflict. They really struggle to act as a unit because, well, everyone is trying to free ride. Meanwhile, defender groups prove to be incredibly stable. Their shared fate makes coordination almost completely effortless.
So that begs the question, how does an attacking army ever actually manage to launch a successful campaign? Well, they literally have to force it. Historically, attacking groups have had to invent these intense cultural institutions just to manufacture the kind of cohesion that defenders get for free. We're talking brutal punishments for desertion, elaborate bonding rituals and war dances, strict command hierarchies, and promises of grand moral or divine rewards.
But, there is another, much more devious solution to the attacker's dilemma. The ultimate trick is for leaders to reframe their ambition as survival. Think about how powerful that is. If you can somehow convince your own population that they are actually the ones being attacked, you can instantly trigger that natural, highly unified defender mindset.
History is just absolutely full of clinical examples where leaders manufactured outside threats exactly to solve this free rider problem. You see this in World War I propaganda depicting the enemy as a mad brute invading American shores, or in fiery Cold War warnings. Notice the core strategy here. They aren't selling the benefits of conquering foreign land. No, they are selling the imminent, terrifying threat of being destroyed at home.
And this is a totally universal tool. It gets used across completely different political eras and nations. Whether it's an image of a bomb threatening the Statue of Liberty or the whole backstabbing myth from post-World War I Germany, the ideological goal is absolutely identical. Generate a hostile attribution bias in your own people. Framing an offense as a desperate defense naturally aligns the group and mobilizes them for war.
Okay, so what does this all mean? What are our core takeaways from this explainer? First, asymmetry completely rules conflict. Second, because of loss aversion and shared fate, defense inherently has the massive advantage over attack. Third, our biology literally dictates our tactics. Attackers are calculating and overconfident, while defenders are reactive and suspicious. And finally, to overcome their natural disadvantages, attacking groups will actually manufacture threats to trigger defensive unity.
Understanding this asymmetry completely changes how we view history and politics, for sure, but it also applies directly to your personal world. So here's a thought to leave you with. The next time conflict sparks in your own life, whether it's a disagreement with a colleague or a fight with a partner, take a step back and ask yourself, are you operating as the ambitious attacker or the vigilant defender? Recognizing the game you're actually playing might just be the exact key you need to resolve it. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.